Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, whether at home or in the diaspora. Welcome once again to Moving Forward. As always, I am happy to be here with you. And to be honest, in all what I expound on this show makes me happy. My brothers and sisters, I'm really aghast when I hear some of the opposition's higher echelon speak because they literally want to sound like they were saints in shining armor, because they were the perfect government in power. Yet, to those who know, they were without a doubt the worst government we have had before or after independence. Before dissecting what has to be said today, I first want to say a prayer to the One Most High. Let us pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Oh Father, as always I come to you in all humility to ask you to bless this little island of ours. In the process, I ask you to bless our Prime Minister, Philip Joseph Pierre, and all his cabinet ministers. I believe that it is you, without a doubt, who sent him to us to protect the weak and vulnerable in our society, and to show that that is the way to the truth and the light. I know that you will be there for him in times of adversity, because you are without a doubt the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords. Amen. Tonight I quote from the Bible, Sirach, chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. I have done so before. All wisdom comes from the Lord, and wisdom is with him forever. Who can count raindrops or the sand along the shores? Who can count the days of eternity? How high is the sky? How profound is wisdom? Can anyone find answers to these questions? Wisdom was created before anything else. Understanding has always existed. Has anyone ever been shown where wisdom originates? Does anyone understand her subtle cleverness? There is only one who is wise, and we must stand in awe before his throne. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Ladies and gentlemen, when the last Prime Minister came into office, he based his election promise on the phrase, 5 to stay alive. Have we forgotten that? Because we seem to have short minds in this country. Our minds, I'm saying it again, is that short. Questions we should be asking ourselves is whether he would be able to fulfill such a task. Even I didn't think about it then. The answer that has been since revealed is that he could not, because it was as false as he is. Dishonest and blatant lies that he perpetrated with his Cambridge Analytica friends in conning voters. What has since transpired is that in Alan's time and time again, has been humiliated by his own words. Here's a guy, together with the other guy, who have lost touch with reality, and they are unhinged by what is truly taking place in the country and the mood of the people. This individual has simply lost touch with reality, so much so it has become unhinged, as I mentioned before. The last government seems to have no plans for the country. They did not have a strategic plan because it was beyond them. They did not understand, with their bother boys and girls, ways of thinking whereby the country should have had a short and long-term plan. They simply lived for today in the hope of conning the people. They simply did not look back or look forward. They were just concerned about domestic terrorism, as I call it, that simply tried to fool the people, and when in office, thought they could rule with an iron fist. Have we forgotten their attitude to Christopher Hunt and a few others? These individuals in office were no more than domestic terrorists because of their continual threats that were simply short-lived because people could not take so much. They made threats that went nowhere. Ladies and gentlemen, their attitude was not normal. They did not care for the poor and downtrodden. They did not care about people's health because they themselves could go to Martinique or Barbados for treatment, or even the Cayman Islands. Did not one of them go all the way to India on the pretext that he was there seeking treatment for his wife? What amazed me is that these individuals thought that we in St. Lucia had blinkers on and that we could not work out that there was something sinister about the trip, more so the treatment which could have been done in the Caribbean. It is clear as alleged that they were planning their privatization of our hospital service. What a bunch of morons. Supported by a few doctors as alleged. Well, this was the government we were dealing with, and therefore they were kicked out unceremoniously. We cannot and should not be fooled a second time, ladies and gentlemen. I tell you this. Inside, they have not changed. They only now put on they've put on different clothing. The fact is as clear as can be. When they were literally kicked out of government by a public who had enough of the highfalutin talk that was simply lies and beneficed dishonesty. They were without a doubt con merchants, as was explained to us, and were pathological in everything they said and did. They simply did not care about health, education, crime, poverty, and the downtrodden, as I've mentioned before on several occasions. I say this in all sincerity because I'm somewhat stunned by what some who are doctors and are now in the media speaking, not as educated people should, and to have been able to use their knowledge and ability to decipher fact from fiction. They simply too blind to see. Why? Because they were focused on self-gratification, as I call it. Can you imagine that someone in a high position as a doctor, an executive of that group, before sending a letter to those it should go to, was simply leaked to the press instead, as has been alleged, to cause alarm and despondency? Yes, some of these people, in my view, were simply about themselves and did not care about those doctors who cared about St. Lucia on the whole. I know that I personally have an excellent doctor, moody sometimes, but one that I admire because he is a lot like me in our humility. The individuals I'm talking about are some of the people who work for the health service, yet were also working for the Cayman Islands group in working out the privatization of our public medical service. These are the people that I'm really talking about. Can one just imagine if the United Records of the Poor had won the election? This is the health service they left in a mess before and after COVID-19. It would not even have existed today if it was not for COVID-19. However, this government is doing all it can to put the island's medical service back on track, as money is being put in, more so CIP monies. God in his infinite wisdom has sent Philip Joseph Pierre to bring the country's medical system back on track. On another front tonight, I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, of this fair isle of ours that I feel saddened when I hear a lady who came into politics pretending that they were one of the purest and honorable individuals to come into our politics. Yet then I thought that this individual would encourage people of stature to come into politics, more so women. But alas, I was completely dissatisfied and, to be blunt, felt somewhat debilitated because of my high hopes and aspirations. So tonight I take this opportunity to lambast the lady that once represented Castries Central. Here is a lady that I would like to ask, in all sincerity, what did she do while representing that constituency? What has she left behind? Please show me your achievement in that constituency, because you represented them long enough to have achieved something of stature. What is there to see in that? She instigated any change that one would say has taken place? I would use my favorite word, and that is simply nada, in my humble opinion. I may be wrong, but if so, I would still like to see that change, and then I would apologize. People like this lady just have mouth, because practically they are useless. This she did for some time, yet cannot really show anything of substance that one can say this is what she did or achieved. Yet Richard Fredericks, whom I don't know very well or fraternize with, have the evidence of what he has achieved, and it is in full view of all St. Lucians and visitors alike. We may not like him, but he worked for his constituency. Many, in my opinion, can say that in their time, regardless what is said about him or how you feel about him, he can show, due to his numerous initiatives, what he has achieved and accomplished for the constituency and thereby the country as a whole. Facts are facts, and the truth should always be accepted by us all with humility. The same can be said when you compare Philip Joseph Pierre with the individual we call Alan Chastanet as Prime Minister of St. Lucia. In 5.5 long years as Prime Minister, I would like to ask Alan to show me one thing he has done or achieved for the country, apart from throwing the country's money, whether borrowed or having taken a loan down the throats of his FFS. I simply need an answer to that question, because after 5.5 long years, all we have is a box that was only 30% finished, which was called a hospital. Can that be right? Can a country be fooled in that manner? And the appeasement that is taking place by some in that party is simply shallow and a sham. Alan and his Bobber boys have simply wasted not only taxpayers' money, but also that which was borrowed. And I will prove this later in this program, because the facts are there to be seen by anyone who can use their grey matter that was given to them by the One Most High. Is at this stage I'll take a break and I'll be back. Hold the line. Welcome back to Moving Forward, and I was comparing Philip Joseph Pierre with Alan. Again, let us compare them when they were both ministers of tourism, as I've mentioned before. Ladies and gentlemen, go into the files and the history of tourism in this country and try to find one hotel that Alan had a hand in building. I may be wrong, but I would simply to dare you to say nothing was built, because nothing was. Therefore, once again, the word is, as I said, nada, because he simply was not interested in building, as I've said before, because time and time again, he showed clearly that he was only interested in knocking down and not building pretenders that he's building a new St. Lucia. He even wanted to destroy our national trust for his own gain or to accomplish his father's wish. Yet, Philip Joseph Pierre built numerous hotels and other infrastructures that enhanced the tourism product. As Minister of Commerce, He was without a doubt vibrant and one of the best we have had. Once again, show me what the individual who sits in the house, who is simply not a builder or a leader, but a follower. Did he not sign something he knew nothing about, but sign to please his autocratic leader? That's the representative for Choiseul. Yet he's talking about the health ministry now, or health service. In Philip's time as Minister of Commerce, he helped the Manufacturers Association. He may not remember that. By giving them a small donation, he made it clear then, 20 years ago, that he would like to see a manufacturing forum with cabinet ministers so that manufacturers could have their grievances heard in the corridors of government. I do hope he remembers that. He was without a doubt that caliber of man, because his motto then was that the people came first in his thinking. And as always, he has stood by that. As we have said before, Alan was not a builder, but one who seemed like a little spoiled boy who would quickly knock things down when he did not have his way. As we saw with the withdrawing the subvention from the National Trust. What grieves me is that he does not even try to improve the infrastructure of anything vital to the community or the country. For him, talk and simply bullshit is the order of the day as far as he's concerned. On another front, he now has a deputy leader who has the audacity to use derogatory words at the Prime Minister's minister by virtually calling him brainless, cheap, and even wicked. As alleged, this guy in many ways was describing himself. And a clear example of this is when he talked about the minimum wage. This came into being on the 1st of October 2024. He then had the audacity to insult those who were now happy to have this minimum wage come into being, when he made the remark that he pays his workers far more money than that. It shows what a thick and senseless brain this individual has and is all about. Because he did not even realize that there were those earning less than that minimum wage in certain circumstances, sometimes, again, far, far less. In the majority of democratic countries of the world, there is a minimum wage because of the exploitation by employers to their employees. What a pathetic jackass for not knowing that. And you are the deputy leader of a party? A real country bookie, if I may say so, and a nincompoop, yet he calls himself an elder at his church, as alleged. Well, that is another of his idiosyncratic words being put just for show. Again, on another front, someone who has done nothing for the constituency she represented now can openly call for an election. Yes, call for an election after this government's 3 years in office. She simply forget that from 2016 to 2021, she represented the Central Castries constituency as a member of the United Records of the Poor. And we must not forget that previously represented the constituency as a Labour representative in Labour's 16-1 annihilation of the United Workers' Party in 1997-98. Therefore, tonight I want to say to this lady that the taste of the pudding is always in the eating. Obviously, your pudding was tasteless because at the last election you were kicked out in a humiliating manner. And now you have the gall and audacity to be talking about this government for an early election, when this present government, in my view, and in many people's view, is doing so much to put the country back on track from the demoralizing state that they found it, or your government left it in. You must never forget that you were part and parcel of that government. Lady, you should literally be ashamed of yourself and ask the One Most High to forgive you for blatant form of dishonesty, as I call it. I can stomach a lot, but that I just could not because of your blatant alleged dishonesty. Ladies and gentlemen of the opposition, what I want to tell you, or you to tell me, and all St. Lucians, what did you do to change the lives of the people after you got into office in 2016? Philippine opposition then asked you some valid questions in the House, more so to the then Prime Minister, and he seems lost for words. What was being asked and said then were like bullets to Alan's empty head, which seems then to be filled with straw. To this day and minute, as Prime Minister of the day, he never answered because he was simply lost for words, which conveyed to me that everything Philip then said was correct and to the point. I will therefore take some time to expound on the speech he made in the House then. I was proud of you, Philip, then, because what you were asking and saying affected every sinew in my body. He was asking questions on the government's projection of $18 million for consultancies within the Ministry of Health by Alan's government. Ladies and gentlemen, in this case, we are talking about foreign consultants. What had transpired is that all those consultants seem to have come from overseas. The question is why? Well, this was obvious because as Minister of Tourism, even then he only believed in overseas consultants. Did he not pay Heppel $100,000 as a consultant, who in the end gave us nothing to improve our tourism product? Was not his name Heppel, or as I said, Heppel? I think his name was such that he was just there for the money. Did he not use St. Lucian money to have what was termed, that is, Alan, boxing in paradise, which cost us an arm and a leg, as we say in England? Don't forget, my people, this individual said clearly to us that he was not a product of this country. I want you to never forget, pas oublier ça. He simply preferred foreigners even when Cuthbert Didier had the grand plans as a director of tourism. He simply cast them aside. A man familiar with tourism at all levels, that's Cuthbert. Oh, I forgot. He was St. Lucian, that's Cuthbert. Did not Alan, in coming to office, pay an English consultant millions of dollars to do our budget as alleged? This was a prime minister who really did not care where our homegrown talent is. Question, did he not give our young encouragement? Did he give our young encouragement? Have we also forgotten that investors would not come to St. Lucia because of his character? We should really take time to interview Ridjock because he did a detailed study of this character. Ladies and gentlemen, with short-term memories, this is the same government that took away the laptops from our children, which was given by the previous Labour government to help them in their studies, as we are now in the new technological age. Now here is a unity government, where the Prime Minister has made the promise that each household should have a graduate in that household, and is making that a plank of his term as Prime Minister of St. Lucia. What grieves me and makes me tremble is when the leader of the opposition, with fake tears in his eyes, as we all know, pretends to cry about the poor in this country under this government. This man is all, dishonest and should be horsewhipped. However, it shows you what the United Records of the Poor are all about. When their deputy leader talks about Castries East in a derogatory manner, I ask him as to whether his government ever put money into Castries East in any real sense. He seems to have a short-term memory when it suits him. In the estimates of the 2021-22, we can clearly see that the then Prime Minister Shashney was doing all he can to have a budget that favored the Cayman Island Consultancy Group, as alleged. Who are these consultancy fees being paid to? Ladies and gentlemen, the then leader of the opposition said clearly in the House that consultancy payments for 2021-22 for the Ministry of Health was $18 million. That was Philip then. And therefore simply asked the question whether these fees were being paid to friends and foreign consultants. This is very serious. I repeat it again, and simply delirious in every sense of the word. It is almost like a horror show. I repeat once again, $18 million for consultancy in the Ministry of Health. Et puis je dis à Zoka dit, oh, health service là, pas bon, c'est les bas qui fait. The leader of the opposition made it clear that the then government continued to show contempt for local professionals who helped set up the OKEU. Phillips then said that. The emphasis here is that, as usual, the then Prime Minister preferred to go overseas to look for those consultants when we have them right here, who are invariably more competent than those that are brought in at huge sums of money. If some will remember, did not his father say to many of us that his son was a spendthrift when he said it to me personally? It's at this juncture I'll take my second break and I'll be back. Welcome back to Moving Forward, and I was talking about that word spendthrift. There is no doubt that he, Alan, spends a lot of money on his foreign friends, more so consultants, because he is not, as I mentioned before, a product of this country. This man has blatantly shown contempt for local consultants whose success was fully commissioned or fully commissioned the OKEU in 2021. Could one imagine that the Alan Shashney government, with $38.4 million in their budget, could have used some of that to fund the Dennery North Polyclinic, for example? Oh, we must not forget that during that period mentioned, Dennery North was a Labour constituency and is still rock-solid Labour. They could have used some of that money in refurbishing and upgrading health centers and wellness centers around the country. The leader then of the opposition was making that clear in his speech in the House. I was somewhat speechless, and I'm sure that many of you did not hear what the then Prime Minister had to say at the end of his speech to the leader of the opposition, Philip Joseph Pierre. Words to the effect as to, who cares? Can one believe that? A Prime Minister is making such a derogatory remark that has now castigated him, in my view, as a selfish bastard, a minion, and one who fits the clothing of the dictator. What he said is recorded, I have it. The same people who now seems to be on the health bandwagon because the CIP saga has been given a whipping in the House by Minister Hilaire, did not seem to think at the time that equipment was needed at the OKEU hospital. And they could have made every effort to do so. Also medicines. were greatly needed. But they did not care because they themselves had the money to go out to get treatment. What a band of morons. This last government was all about. There is not one who can safely say that they work courageously and unselfishly. They were a band of merry men and women. Did not one tell us, after what has come to light about her dishonesty in terms of a huge sum of money, as alleged, was seeped out of funds dealing with lottery, that we should not listen to garbage by the press, etc., but then listen to Junwa, as alleged. They did not care one iota about working conditions for nurses, doctors, and other health providers. However, the government preferred to pay, as I said again, $18,000 to overseas consultants instead of using far less to pay our own competent consultants, when they would have had some money to spend on drugs, etc. I heard on a program that the then Prime Minister making it clear to his audience that the government will pay all the utilities. That's when they were planning their privatization, and all the capital costs for OKEU, and that was on a privatization bandwagon. If what I listened to is correct, and I would therefore say allegedly, how can anyone tell me that this guy had a decent head on his shoulder? The man simply did not give a damn about the poor in this country. The leader of the opposition then said in the House that the Prime Minister is talking about privatizing the hospital because he could not find the $52 million necessary for the operation of the hospital annually. Yet here was the same individual who gave away $54 million in VAT collections, including the salaries of foreigners if they worked at the OKEU. Philip then made the point that Guy Joseph went to India for his wife's treatment and health care at Nareen National Hospital, or Nareen NH Hospital. And believe it or not, Cayman owned, I was told. Oh yes, that comedian was laughing when Philip made the statement and made it clear as he laughed that he can do so because he can afford to go to India for health care for his wife. Many people had open eyes. We must open it now. And they had the ploy in terms of privatizing the hospital. That is a fact. We must never forget that. Was he not then Minister of Economic Affairs, Guy Joseph? I would say without moving my eyelids that both the leader and deputy leader of the United Records of the Poor at the time, for me, were detestable characters. There are others, but they are simply not in their league. As I mentioned before, when a Prime Minister can make the statement in the House, and I have recorded that, members come to the House and talk about 9 million consultancy fees, and simply says, so what? He simply says, so what? I mentioned that before. That in essence shows us the individual's mentality and his disregard for the country we call St. Lucia. These are the same guy in opposition that is now talking about our health service under this government when they are the ones who destroyed the health service that was left behind by the Kenny government administration. They did not even think of refurbishing or upgrading our country's medical health centers. Yet there they are demonstrating about the health center in Castries Central. That was a health hazard at this juncture for patients, doctors, nurses, and ancillary staff because of the mold infestations and other things. They simply forget that they did nothing in that regard. Even the government offices where staff was falling sick regularly because of inhaling that bacterium. Honestly, tonight, I'm in a foul mood because these morons who run the last government should be ashamed of themselves and should keep their mouths shut. But they have no pride, kindness, and humility in their hearts. They are, in my view, completely devoid of these attributes. Now I come to the Honorable King's presentation. When he spoke about the critical deficiencies between 2016 and 2021, and don't forget he was in that government, he deliberately touched on the dredging that should have taken place. And you know, funny enough, he said 8% was dredged on the Roseau Dam. 8%! Yet the work completed by the so-called contractor was at a cost of $60 million. This, in my view, went down while they were dredging. Question that King is asking in all sincerity is that, can one imagine the position the water situation would have been in today if the dredging was done correctly and efficiently? The question I personally ask is, who was the economic minister then? Who was doing the monitoring that should have been taking place in the dredging process? There is a serious question, and therefore we need answers, because this was taxpayers and borrowed monies. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, as Minister King put it, after 3 to 4 years, only 8% of dredging was done. When one considers $60 million, I repeat, was spent on the process. Is this not a travesty of justice? These individuals think that they can pull the wool over our eyes as much as possible because the populace is that stupid. These are the same barefaced idiots out there asking for an election when this present government is putting things back together, as I mentioned before, which they destroyed because of the inefficiency. And I use the word cantankerousness and dishonesty. They're selfish and greedy people as they are. Where in the world could such a thing happen? And no one is being sued or punished for sheer inefficiency. Minister King talked about the whims and fancies of some in the government then. He made it clear that because of these people, the government now have to fend for themselves. They are forced to shutting down systems, to make repairs, that's WASCO, and infrastructure improvements. Ladies and gentlemen, this is simply outrageous and downright pathetic and unacceptable. These individuals, in my view, were an army of morons because what took place is not normal. Many in that government were simply men and women with the lowest moral character. Even our Minister of Education then was the biggest joke I had ever come across. She was simply absurd when one thinks that the lady was slowly destroying our education system. King, and she was in government with King. King mentioned that WASCO is an endeavor to improve the system. It will need $250 million right now to deal with some of the problems. All this is the consequence of neglect that will cost a substantial amount due to aging pipelines. Therefore, some pipelines will cost $2.6 million, and that the entire project will be $6 to $7 million. This Prime Minister made it clear that very soon there will be a massive investment in primary health care in this country under his watch, and much will begin this year and early next year. He spoke about the polyclinic at the Old Victoria Hospital, which will come into being soon. He made it clear that we are not here to complain. We are here to fix. I felt good inside when he said that. The fifth finger of the OKEU hospital will begin later this year or early next year. What made me chuckle was when he said quite categorically that it will be done with CIP monies. This was never heard from them or from their mouths or the mouths of the last government. But what really brought joy to my heart is when he reminded the opposition of the elderly they neglected, and now he's doing something in that direction. Bravo, comrade. The elderly will be getting free medical service, and also mothers. He mentioned that he had full confidence in the health minister, and that, in my view, is necessary to say because he inherited a health service that was completely decimated by the last government. And we still have the same PS that was there before, is still there, as alleged. What grieves me is that we still have her there. And I believe that the government should have moved a lot of these permanent secretaries. I say this in all sincerity. This is my opinion, and many others. He also mentioned that the Prime Minister's confidence in doctors and nurses of the St. Lucian Health Service. He also made it clear that there must be a holistic approach to healthcare in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, I say this in all sincerity, that it was learned a long time ago that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. After listening to the brilliance of the Prime Minister, I was listening to something from the Deputy Leader of the United Records of the Poor that was nonsensical then. Here is the individual making a statement that there must be a clear plan. And he's talking as if this government does not have that plan. He said something to belittle the government by uttering those words. Let me tell you how bad it is. They take the man who was in charge of Bordelais, can you believe it, and put him in charge of the police. So now Bordelais is therefore headless. Honestly, this is simply senseless. He went on to say that this government is a clueless government. They have no plans. It was then I thought, what a diabolical, clueless nonentity that he's given us. More so, he's given us a nondescript explanation of what the government was putting in place to make both Bordelais and the police hierarchy effective and efficient. His government between 2016 and 2021 was the one who was clueless. For 5.5 long years, that is why they were literally kicked out of government. Their inefficiency when in power is now coming home to roost, ladies and gentlemen. I want, even at my age, to play a part in the life of this country and its people. Because the more I hear of the idiots and the mendicants in the opposition, I just cannot give up. When I look at the last government and the individuals who led them, I simply see them as idiots to the core. As far as politics was concerned, they were like fish out of water. I say that honestly. I was brought up to believe in democracy. But those I was looking at did not seem to have understood that. They seemed somewhat a bunch of nincompoops that seemed to them, the world we live in was for the few, the very few at that. To them it favored the privileged and those who could monopolize the government. They did not understand that they were in power simply as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Well, Philip Joseph Pierre understood that. He has had over 26 years of learning to inculcate this in his being or his head. However, to my way of thinking, it has been there since his embryonic stage in politics. Philip has come to the realization that he is a servant of the state and not its master. I have no doubt been impressed and encouraged by the way the government has gone on to put things right after the last government's disintegration and destruction of the country, more so the poor areas. Don't forget, one told us that Castries East looks like, as he passes it every day, that he simply forgot that he was also passing there between 216 and 221. It's at this juncture I'll take my next break. Hold the line. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And I was talking about 216 and 221 as to what this individual said. Yet he failed to see that it needed help and a transformation. That's Castries East. What a fake and dishonest individual that we have in our politics. This is the same individual who made it clear to some. So you are crying. Well, you have a lot of crying to do. Yet, as I've mentioned, with all his millions, he's the one still crying. Because he's not in power and will never get back into power. That is what he's now crying about. So, comrade, you're crying, you continue crying. I tell you this, in all honesty, you do have a lot of crying to do. And the people of this country will make sure of that. They attack and set upon this government because they are aware that with the continuance of the work that is being done, they will never have a chance to get back into office. The people are complacent and well-grounded and have confidence in work Philip Joseph Pierre is doing on behalf of the country. It is clear that the opposition will stop at nothing. So much so, all they have is their arsenal is by creating alarm and despondency, misinformation and disinformation, because that is all they know. And as has been alleged, that they are some of the most dishonest politicians this country has ever had. There is no doubt that we will have times of trials, at times trials and tribulation. There will also be many disappointments. However, we must be steadfast and must be able to accomplish all we can for the youth of this country. I can assure those who care that they're not stupid and that the idea that is being put out is that this government is not working to improve their condition is false and a monumental lie. Ladies and gentlemen, we must have courage because we have to be thankful that so much time has been given to us by the One Most High. He has sent us a faithful servant, and that is no mystery, should be no mystery to us, because the future days to come will be for the best, because we have Philip Joseph Pierre as our Prime Minister. Comrades, the country must walk, pray, and sing together because of the development that has been taking place since this Prime Minister came into power. Something I learned some years ago, that we don't have to love each other. But what is important is that we have to do what we can for the common good. In my view, it is all about the country, not of me personally. And I think Philip thinks the same. I think sincerely of the children that are here and those to come. We must leave a country worth living for them, because our parents did so for us. Before closing tonight, I want to know simply why the UWP signed up with Galaxy, or who opened the door for Galaxy to come here. Don't forget, we had heard so much about the length of time they were taking to build a hotel in St. Kitts, the Ramada, I think. However, did not Alan, as the Prime Minister said, he had such great reports about them or heard. However, he no doubt failed to have heard that alleged money laundering was taking place in that company then. Did he not tell us that they are doing a tremendous job in the building of that Ramada Hotel? This is a hotel that has taken, as reported and alleged, 9 years to build and is still not finished. Alan must think that we are jackasses, the ones he was talking about with the mendicants. However, we now know that he was talking about those miscreants in his party. However, not all are that inclined, because once again, I want to remind the listeners that he once said that his class did not vote for him. Personally, I simply fail to understand what he meant. I really would like to know his class, because as I see it, no class would have him. Yet Guy Joseph, when he questioned, seemed not to recollect that it was their government that was in power when Galaxy came to St. Lucia. He seemed to be concentrated more on Les Can. Then that is for him relevant. Was the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's personal lawyer, not the same for Galaxy? That's a simple question. What I fail to understand for such a past diligent government, that the prison project to be built by Galaxy failed in St. Kitts. The excuse then was when Galaxy came to St. Lucia, the project failed in 2021. The whole dumb excuse was simply a sham, because it did not make sense and he was simply at a loss. And that is when his insults seemed to come to the fore about the reporters should go and do their research. One of the reporters was Choice reporter. And he had done his research. What is clear is that the opposition knows full well that they were depending on Martinez to throw the bomb at this government, but they failed to have realized that the individual was not credible, and his past should have been a clear indication of this. That to me shows how naive and stupid the last government was, to have had confidence in an alleged con merchant and a fraudster who served prison sentences in 2 countries. This shows us the level of their thinking. I believe that we must keep reminding the opposition of this, because they wanted to undermine our Prime Minister, Minister of Tourism, and Mr. Emmanuel. Well, they failed miserably because they simply did not care and did not do their homework. But the Choice reporter did his homework. All they simply cared about was sensationalism, to demean this present government. And they even took time to throw some punches at the Prime Minister's daughter, who is well qualified for the job she is doing at CIP. Did not Martinez say explicitly to them, to come and see what I have? Guy openly said that he never said he will give us the information for the people, like you to corrupt. And he was talking to the reporters then when he said that. Well, Guy did not. If Guy did not, the leader of the opposition said that when he returns, he will bring the evidence. That was recorded. And when that was not forthcoming, did he not say that it will be sent via email? Well, he did not produce it. However, if I recall, he made it clear that it would be a bombshell. Well, I want to remind Spider and all his friends that, because now he wants to call the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, a liar, when his leader is the biggest liar out. Well, that is the bomb that never exploded. Why? Because there was no bang. This is my view, and it was a political football that the United Records of the Poor want to play, and it simply blew up in their faces. There are some who seem to want to blame the Minister of Health now, because they have convinced themselves that the Prime Minister is doing all the talking on his behalf. This is simply bull. I find that sort of talk somewhat dishonest, because what the Prime Minister is basically doing is telling the public where the allocation of government funds will be put, and that is in health, more so with CIP funds. He's clearly showing how much will be going to the health service. That's all. I'm sure the minister will explain when necessary. This is another red herring by the opposition because they have nothing to cling on to. Tonight, before I end, I must say that I was taken aback by something I received from a good friend who was known to Philip nearly all her life. Because of this, I know she's aware of the Prime Minister's hard work. I therefore felt compelled tonight to share it with you, my listeners. I know that everything she says comes from the heart because I feel the same as she does. Guy, she said, is just disrespectful. I just find the work of the prosecutor, special prosecutor, that is taking too long. That is why they could still open their mouths, or their useless mouths, to talk nonsense. Spider is another one, but they can't stop the PM. He has put out some of the best policies in place. And I know he will go down in our history books as the best Prime Minister in St. Lucia that St. Lucia ever had. A man for the people. I was really taken aback because of the quietness and humility of this lady. She has my support 200% because we all see the ignorant statements that their supporters make in the comment section simply because the truth is too much for them to bear. I tell them this, that the good Lord is with me and in me, and is also with Philip and in Philip. I say this to Alan, his nincompoops, that as long as Philip Joseph Pierre is the Prime Minister of this hell of the West, and regardless what you and your motley crew do, you cannot win another election. In St. Lucia, oh, by the way, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt, because truth is forever on the throne. In closing, I want once again to remind you, brothers and sisters, that we are all black and should be proud of that. There are those who fail to understand, and that Marcus Garvey and Bob Marley was not wrong when they made it clear that we are black and should be proud of that. So go in peace until we meet again next week. Therefore, I say good night to you and goodbye to you all. Good night and good night.